Support comes from
Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
Sort of a random array of issues. I mean, it's a general session, so that often happens, but it's more so noticeable this year.
What are lawmakers getting done at the Capitol?
So when you talk about soybeans, you're talking about billions of dollars.
What Chinese tariffs mean for Louisiana farmers.
This is one of our key cornerstone projects in our coastal master plan.
How cutting red tape will speed up coastal restoration.
Hi everyone, I'm Andre Morrow. Much more on those stories in a moment, but right now on SWI, the state we're in, some of the week's other top headlines.
Workers in Louisiana took home more money with bigger paychecks in 2017. New data shows per capita income rose 2.9% thanks to an economic bounce back from the year before. Personal income is made up of net earnings, income from property and transfer receipts, such as government assistance like Medicare or Social Security, and retirement benefits from private employers. Lafayette General is threatening to shut down its university hospital and clinics and lay off 800 workers if they lose funding from the state. The notice from the private nonprofit hospital is similar to ones already delivered by the private partners of state-owned hospitals in New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Those hospitals serve Medicaid patients and the uninsured. There are 9 of them statewide that former Governor Bobby Jindal privatized earlier this decade. The deals were contingent on state funds, and without the money, the scenario does not work. The current conundrum goes back to the legislature at some point finding a way to fix the $1 billion fiscal cliff. Almost $100,000 is what it has cost the state so far to deal with the sexual harassment case against Johnny Anderson, a former deputy chief of staff to Governor John Bel Edwards. Documents show the state has agreed to pay $85,000 to prevent a lawsuit from a former employee of the governor and her lawyer. In signing the settlement, Anderson does not admit any wrongdoing. Records show Louisiana state government has paid out at least $3.9 million since 2004 in legal settlements with state workers alleging sexual harassment or gender discrimination. The pilots of some ships on the Mississippi River want more money, but the State Chemical Association wants to know why. These pilots already earn in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the groups that oversee them want 5-figure raises, along with a 40% hike in the reimbursement for their travel from home to job. That would mean salaries of about $475,000 a year. The whole issue is tied up in the courts, but history shows the courts favor the pilots. Louisiana river pilot groups operate as monopolies on sections of the river south of Baton Rouge. State law allows this tight, exclusive fraternity to go about their business with little opposition.
And another big headline here. It's being hailed as historic progress for flood protection. Governor Edwards and Congressman Garrett Graves have announced they've secured another $1.2 billion in federal money to help parishes impacted by the floods of 2016. Now, the money could fund completion of the Comeet River Diversion project, for example. It allows the state to make investments in large-scale projects through the Army Corps of Engineers.
The flood was devastating, and the recovery is going to be continue to be going on for years because it was huge challenges. So far, we've been able to bring in about $8 billion in federal funds for the recovery, helping to rebuild our community and not rebuild it the same way. Rebuild it smarter, rebuild it stronger.
At the Capitol, lawmakers have 59 more days to shape new laws that will shape Louisiana's future. They've already been in this session 26 days. What's been accomplished? Here to discuss, Associated Press reporter Melinda Deslatte, Elizabeth Crisp of the Advocate newspaper, and from WAFB TV, Kevin Frey. LPB's Kelly Spires is here to head up our discussion. Kelly?
Thank you, Andre. So in even-numbered years at the Capitol, you can't take up, the legislators can't take up fiscal matters. So already in an even-numbered year, things can feel kind of structureless. Melinda, I'd like to ask you if it feels especially structureless this year.
It does seem as though it feels a little less like there's a guiding premise throughout the session. It seems as though the governor's agenda is maybe a little heavier on the financial focus, obviously because of the state's continuing budget problems. And so there's less of a structured plan coming down from the top. I'm not even sure if there was one of those, though, that the House members would really much care, for example, because there are some political disagreements there. But it does seem as though it's just kind of a grab bag of topics that are out there that are just kind of like throw it on the wall and see what sticks, responses to things that have happened nationally and locally, and just sort of a random array of issues. I mean, it's a general session, so that often happens, but it's more so noticeable this year.
Because one of the things that the governor talked about at the outset of this was like one of his main focuses would be licensing for small business, and so that was kind of his big intro during the welcoming speech of the session. And we have seen one of those bills dealing with florists actually get through a committee. And then there's also a bill that would kind of create this task force to review licenses and whether or not we need them. But that seems to be kind of one of the main pieces of his agenda that's getting someplace. I mean, the minimum wage bill stalled, and the equal pay is also kind of scuttled aside. But that's kind of maybe the things that he was talking about that are even noteworthy.
So does the unresolved budget, is that a cloud over everything that they discuss and everything that happens? It seems to just loom over everything regardless of what's going on.
Oh, definitely. We're, 3 weeks into session, and we've had just these hours-long hearings on state agency budgets that just continue on. And this is the same stuff that we've been hearing for 2 years. We have gone through every special session, we've had these same hearings. Every regular session, we've had these same hearings. They're still going. Sunday, the Senate Finance Committee is going to meet to start its own version of hearings on the budget. And so it really is, it's just this thing that's hanging over everyone. Everyone is kind of aware that there's probably going to be another special session whenever this session ends. And so it's just kind of sucked up all the air.
And if there's not another special session, it would be disastrous for so many people.
I think most of the leadership agrees that there needs to be. When exactly that's going to happen, nobody really knows at this point. Will it start early? Will it go at the end? That's unclear, but there seems to at least be the acceptance that it's going to happen from at least enough key players to keep the process going along.
I would ask, if we get farther into the session, will the budget become more of a prominent issue? But
I think now that we are approaching the public testimony portion of the discussion where people can actually weigh in, and you're going to see a lot of folks there in their yellow shirts advocating for waivers and healthcare services and whatnot, they'll be much more prominent. And then once it gets to the floor and those discussions really open up for the entire general body, I think that's when you'll start seeing much more of a focus on it. It's kind of been malaise in the background.
Well, will it even pass?
I think there's another piece of it, which is right now the governor offered, and he was required to, he had to offer a budget proposal that matched how much money is projected to be available. So that was sort of the doomsday worst case scenario budget proposal, but nobody actually agrees that figure is how much would really have to be cut. So sometime in mid-April, there is supposed to be a meeting of the Revenue Estimating Conference, which does the state's income projections. And I think when you see a more accurate figure from them and lawmakers know what they have to work with in terms of making budget cuts, you'll see the budget probably move a little more to the forefront.
Because that was the reason when we had the special session that a lot of people were objecting to doing anything because they weren't sure what the actual figure looked like.
Let's move on to some topics that are being discussed this session. One thing that is taking up a lot of space in the Capitol, or at least a lot of the lobbying power, is gambling. And gaming. And could y'all tell us
call it gambling.
Just call it gambling.
It's gambling.
Moving it off the riverboats and onto the land.
What are the bills being considered?
Well, that is one of them. The one that would allow basically the riverboats that are no longer steaming up and down the rivers to actually move onto the land right next to where they are parked permanently, essentially. That is one of the key bills that has been in discussion. That one is stalled in the Senate right now over discussions, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, over whether or not the minimum wage gets to move to its inevitable death in the House. But that's probably one of the more prominent ones that are out there.
I mean, it does seem as though, so there was a task force on riverboat gaming that came up with suggestions of how to make the industry more competitive with other states. And that's kind of what prompted it. And once the riverboat gambling industry kind of had a foothold of bills, it seems as though every sector of the industry piled on. There are bills from video poker, there are bills from the racetrack casino industry, there's a Harrah's land-based casino in New Orleans legislation that would extend their contract for another 30 years. It's like everybody jumped on this bandwagon and figured, well, if we're going to talk about gambling, we're going to be all in on gambling. And Senate President John Alario has expressed concern about the sheer volume of bills. I mean, there are things about legalizing sports betting, legalizing online betting, legalizing any kind of internet gaming. And so he's raised concerns that it's just, they don't want this session to be known as the session that they expanded gambling and didn't do much else.
And you're seeing a lot of people being very creative with their how they justify that it's not actually an expansion of gambling in Louisiana when that question comes up.
Just moving the footprint a little bit.
Yeah.
There has been talk of undoing the criminal justice reform put into place this past year. Where's that going?
Well, I would say that there are clearly some bills introduced that would scale back some of the changes that were made over the last couple of years. One bill that has already passed the House would change the probationary rules, so it would lengthen the probation terms, which is sort of an outright undoing of some things that they had enacted last year. The advocacy community that has supported the criminal sentencing law changes is really opposed to a lot of that stuff. There's also a proposal, Louisiana a couple years ago enacted a raise the age law, which is, it would change the age that juveniles are treated as adults in the criminal prosecution system. So right now we let 17-year-olds be treated as adults for prosecution purposes and criminal sentencing. And it would change that to 18. It's supposed to take effect in July. There's some talk of moving that back to 2 years. The governor has said he'd be willing to consider moving it back 1 year, but he is really reticent about doing anything more than that. So,
and part of the reason they're doing that is it's stymied, or at least the argument is it's stymied in funding for the Office of Juvenile Justice and whether or not there's enough to actually enact those reforms. So again, it all kind of goes back to the budget.
Right. There are other interesting bills that have to do with criminal justice this session, like the Senator Morell's unanimous jury bill that moved in the Senate this week. Liz, would you like to explain that?
So right now, Louisiana is one of 2 states that does not require a unanimous jury on some felonies. And so it's been an effort that people have pushed for several years. It's been questioned, just is this even constitutional to have this? It made it through the Senate. It still has a big hurdle in the House. It has to go through committee, and then if it makes it out of committee, go into the House floor would be a real challenge. But it really is something that does have a huge impact, not just on how things are treated in Louisiana, but also how Louisiana is seen more broadly. This is, Jim Crow era. It has a lot of implications for racial disparities in Louisiana, so it is something that could have a big impact if it were to make it through.
So let me ask this, are legislators on pace to wrap up early so they can then catch their breath and move on to another special session? How about that?
The eternal question. Will they finish early?
See, we said it, clouds and hovers over everything, right?
They are clearly moving at an accelerated pace. Right. You're seeing the Senate working on more controversial bills much sooner than they would normally. You see House committees working on days that they would not normally be working. So they are clearly moving along as though they are trying to end early. They have not agreed between the 2 chambers on a timeline for when they would end early. And of course, whatever they end, the assumption is that they would then move into a special session to discuss taxes again. So it's not like they would be going home. They'd just be moving into a different phase of debate.
And the governor has asked both the House and Senate to adopt some sort of resolution. We will end by this date as a sign of, good faith, I guess, because it wouldn't
we have a lot of
matter
that at the
much.
Capitol right now.
Yeah. And so I asked the House Speaker about it, and he's like, they can say that, but I have 105 members, and there are a lot of bills over here, and so I can't say with certainty that we can get everything done early that we want to. And it's not very often that you see the legislature in something early or in the most timely fashion. The last time that they finished something early was the special session that ended in a massive collapse and with a lot of hard feelings. So I don't.
They're sort of like high school procrastinators.
They
tend to work to
that
the
is
final
so
minute.
comforting. Yeah,
It's very similar to journalists too.
As Ted James put it, they don't like to see just the smoke. They need to see the fire before they're willing to act.
All right. Well, we'll be watching the fire and the smoke. And thank you all so much for being here with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
President Trump's trade war rhetoric with China continues to boil, with both sides going at it. Now, these international policy decisions may seem far away from our day-to-day lives here in Louisiana, but are they? Kelly Spires is reporting on this. Kelly?
Thank you, Andre. Well, yes, these tariffs do hit home, especially if you're a farmer. One of the crops that China will charge to import is soybeans. And we grow a lot of those here in Louisiana. I spoke with Agriculture and Forestry Commissioner Mike Strain about what farmers can expect. Commissioner, could you tell me what a tariff is and how it could affect someone in Louisiana?
Well, what a tariff is when a government places a fee on top of the cost of a commodity, whatever that is, coming into the country. So in other words, a tariff would be, for instance, if you have a tariff on cars, and it's generally in percentages. So if you have tariffs on a car coming, again, say from Japan, you may say, okay, there's a 17% tariff. So if that car, the wholesale price is $30,000, 17% more is added to that, and those funds go into the United States Treasury. Most tariffs are in place in order to level the playing field on the value of the commodity based on how it's produced in the country of origin.
So what are some of the products from Louisiana that concern you?
Well, the primary product, of course, is soybeans. Now, if you look at China and soybeans, China produces about 14 million metric tons of soybeans. They import 93 million metric tons. More than 62% of all soybeans exported from the United States go to China. But if you look, what does 10% tariff potentially mean? It could cut our exports to China by up to 33%. If you have those tariffs and then we do not find other markets, then we will have a decrease in the price, our value, right? The market price of all soybeans. So when you talk about soybeans, you're talking about billions of dollars.
So we've talked a lot about international supply and demand and markets worldwide, but how do tariffs affect people in Louisiana farmers?
If China hits us with a 10 or a 15%, okay, immediate tariff, then it could decrease our exports by a third to China, right? So we must find other markets, and that's going to be the job of not only the private companies, but also the USDA and the federal government through our trade negotiators. Or what you would see, immediately you would see a decline in the value of the commodity. In other words, the soybean price per bushel will go down until we can correct that.
Farmers have already done a lot of planning this year. Is there anything that they can do to not avoid the price drop, but to cope with the price drop?
And so have you seen the big shifts in the stock market the last few days, right? Up and down, up and down, up and down, right? You're going to see some shifts in the commodity markets. Now, where we're at with our commodities, a lot of our farmers have already forward contracted a percentage of their crop. As we plant, generally speaking, now more probably with corn than soybeans, because we really haven't started, planting our beans yet. But as they begin planting, they go ahead and forward contract, in other words, sign a sale contract on a fraction of their crop. And it depends on the farmer, anywhere from a half to 60%. And then as the further you get towards harvest, then you contract more to the grain elevators. So those negotiations are going on now. Now, some of the farmers, they're seeing a rapid decline in price because they probably have not signed their forward contracts on the soybeans yet. They haven't locked that in. And if it's moving down, they may wait and see if this tips on back up.
What are state and federal officials doing to mitigate the situation?
I know our trade negotiators are working very, very hard. You know, we have our agricultural trade negotiators. We have Mr. Lighthouser, who is the ambassador for trade. We also have Ted McKinney with the USDA, who is leading up the Foreign Agricultural Service, and everyone working hard to try to deal with these particular issues. But these issues have to be dealt with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I want to thank the LSU Ag Center for providing some of that footage of soybeans. The price of soybeans fell about 4% after the tariffs were announced, bringing the margin of profit for farmers close to the break-even point. Prices rebounded slightly on Thursday, and we'll have to see how the markets shake out over the next couple of weeks. Andre?
All right, the concern remains. Kelly, thank you so much. There's some good news this week for the state's coastal master plan. The time frame for the proposed Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion got moved up 2 years. Getting all the permits for such a giant, first-of-its-kind project is an ordeal. But November 2020 is now the time frame for those permits to be complete. I talked with Brad Barth of CPRA Operations about it.
So this is the general area of the Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion. You can kind of see the footprint here of the diversion itself. And these green dots, I'm not sure if they'll show up on the camera for everybody, but these kind of show the area that the project may influence or where the sediment may be deposited.
This is what you're wanting to be rebuilt?
Right, this is the area. This is kind of the top of the broken marsh. So if you go further north into the coast, we get a little bit healthier, much fresher, healthier marsh. If you go further to the south, you start getting into open and more broken water. So this is kind of the top of our problem. We've kind of already worked on the barrier islands in previous years, and now comes the time to start working on this area and fill in that gap.
And how far upriver from the delta is this right here?
Well, we're at river mile 61, so about 60 miles above head of passes.
Okay.
We've talked about kind of the symbiotic relationship with the dredging projects, the marsh creation projects that we do. If we look at here's some old dredging marsh creation projects that we've done in the past. And we know that by having these on the landscape with today's dollars and efforts, we can get those working for us today and helping restore our coast. As we bring this project online, this project then can feed the nutrients and the sediments to maintain and sustain these projects. So ultimately, we think this is a very viable solution for long-term sustainability to the coast.
Barth says the marsh creation projects only have about a 20-year lifespan before they have to be recreated because of sea level rise and other factors. When there's a high water event, there are satellite photographs that show the rich sediment and silt flowing into the Gulf of Mexico at the mouth of the river. This drives home the need, and I guess the point of the diversion project, correct?
It does, Andre, and you can see with that imagery, every spring flood that we have of the sediment that's getting away from us, the sediment that can be used to harness to feed our coastal wetlands. This is one of our key cornerstone projects in our coastal master plan and one of our tools that we think we can use to rebuild the coast. So capturing and harnessing the power of the Mississippi River, and not only the water power, but also the silts and the clays, the fine sediments that come down on an everyday basis. And then also all those more coarse-grained sediments and their sands that travel down from point bar to point bar are also things that we can harness and capture and utilize for our best advantage. We're in the process of onboarding our contractor right now for the construction portion. There's a lot of work to do in terms of engineering and pre-construction services, but in general, a project of this size and magnitude, this is a mega infrastructure project. We're looking at about a 3 to 5 year timeline or window to actually construct the project before it would be able to operate.
Describe the actual work, what you would see on the ground if you're standing by the levee, what you'll actually see happen.
We have work ongoing down at the project site today on the engineering and design side. We've started completing some of the wetland delineation work that's needed in an environmental review process. We'll be out there in short order doing our geotechnical soil borings.
What does wetland delineation mean? What does that mean?
Wetland delineation, so as part of the Army Corps' permitting process, the Section 404 permit is jurisdictional wetlands. So we go out and evaluate which areas are jurisdictional wetlands that we may need to mitigate for if we have an impact to those wetlands, and which areas that may not be jurisdictional where we have no impact. In terms of reconnecting the river, so what the idea is, or the thought process is reestablishing that natural connection from the Mississippi River. Before we had levees, the river would break through a natural levee deposit and splay out into the marsh and nourish those coastal marshes, add material and build a small delta or a small splay of sediment and channels and networks. So that's the idea behind this, reestablish this natural connection. We'll see that controlled structure go through the Mississippi River levee, through the back levee, and then open up and allow that natural process to occur, allowing that water, silt, and sediment then to flow out into the open water and establish that natural network of a deltaic type splay or development, similar to what you would see possibly at the Wax Lake or the Atchafalaya rivers and what they're doing over a little bit further west on the coast.
Now, Barth says depending on the spring flood levels and what the river gives in the way of sediment over time, that will play a role in seeing the project actually take seed. And that is our show for this week, everyone. Remember, you can watch LPB on demand on your phone or tablet with our LPB Anywhere app. The download is free from your app store. There you will find LPB news and public affairs shows and other Louisiana programs that you've come to enjoy over the years. And please like us on Facebook as well. For everyone at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow. Thanks for watching. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Check us out on Facebook and Twitter, and visit lpb.org, where you can view more stories and leave us a comment. This program is available on DVD. Support comes from
Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.